may have noticed, Deathwing was defeated by us in Cataclysm, but we never actually saw him in the Shadowlands, which is supposedly the afterlife. This goes perfectly with the recently established lore that when a character is infused by a certain magic, it is tied then to that realm, and if Deathwing was infused by anything, it was the Void, meaning that he is much like the actual old gods outside of the entire life and death cycle. With the recent huge Black Empire hints, the possible return of the Void Lords, and the Zod being the most important in this entire story, this could be incredibly likely. Even more importantly, the aspects are seeking to get their powers back, and what if, once they do, Deathwing also gets his power back inadvertently, who could then be used by the old gods as a tool once again, and even possibly as a gateway for a potential Void invasion into Azeroth. So could we see a return of a Void Deathwing? It is literally the third year that Rich Wallet sent me this thing, and I've been using it pretty much ever since. I haven't used anything else. They've also sent me the key case, which matches everything perfectly, and there are just so many designs you can choose from. The wallet is super useful. You can put cash, you can put up to 12 cards. It's really just great. Now, if you use my code DORAN, you can get a really great discount, so make sure to check out my link in the description below and get your own Rich Wallet or key case. The reality is that we don't really know much about what Deathwing has actually been doing all this time, as at this point, really most of it is speculation. I have an entire video you can check out on the theory that he may have actually been the first Illidan, and that he was using both Titan and Old God magic, sort of towing the line in order to break control of both of these invading forces of Azeroth, but ultimately, he fully slided into the Void where he was actually corrupted. Now, imagine it something like this. Illidan essentially had to become a demon in order to battle the Burning Legion, but instead of winning, he actually fully succumbed to Fel, joined the Burning Legion, and just helped them invade Azeroth. I feel like this is a similar scenario that happened with Goltarion, just instead of Fel magic, it was Void magic. Now, Shadowlands, unfortunately, really drastically changed everything we know about the Afterlife and just the Warcraft lore in general. It was just an earthquake for the lore, and we did, in a way, learn that the Afterlife is sort of a meme. Not only is it not like some sort of a heaven, but you can literally die in the Afterlife and your soul essence just gets destroyed into nothingness. However, what is the most interesting aspect is that the death in the Shadowlands realm seems to be a mortal thing, only this same thing doesn't count for the creatures of the light like the Naaru or demons, which is, of course, why we never actually ran into them in Shadowlands in the previous expansion. The only time we saw the beings of the light is when they had invaded the Shadowlands, and same is for the demons, as we know the Burning Legion also invaded the Death Realm. This may also be why people like Tyrion that were really devoted to the light were not at all present in the Shadowlands. Now, you may be thinking, if that is the case, how is it possible that Argus, an actual Titan World Soul, was sent into Shadowlands and we have to fight him? But not only is that not a counterpoint, but it also further confirms this point. Apparently, by the Shadowlands lore, the Nathrezim had infiltrated the Legion and they had infused Argus with death magic so that specifically it can go into the Shadowlands so that it can break the Machine of Death and end in the most anticlimactic fight ever. Now, Blizzard actually confirmed that various cosmological forces have their own versions of the afterlives, even if they can't die. I feel like death might not even really be a thing for a lot of these cosmological beings. For example, we know that demons pretty much can always regenerate in some way unless they're killed in the Twisted Nether, but that really is similar to souls disappearing in the Shadowlands. Furthermore, Blizzard has heavily hinted that the old gods can't actually die, that they're sort of outside of this entire cycle. We can see the Void in Shadowlands, but that is when they had invaded it as well as they tried to conquer the realm. However, as you might have noticed, something with the old gods, there is one thing that is always constant with them, and that is that they really are just a pain in the neck. They're just impossible seemingly to get rid of. The super powerful titans couldn't get rid of them. They almost killed Azeroth, removing Y'Shaarj, and they even organized an entire facility in order to test just how can we remove these guys. And the only thing they did is they managed to create Kahun, this old godlike monstrosity that is just pure decay magic, and they didn't even do this on purpose. This is even evident that we sort of defeated Yoxeron, but Blizzard just confirmed that he is still around in Northrend, or how we have Laser defeated N'Zoth, but he seems to be sort of back in the Dragonflight with new whispers and a very likely return. Now, in my opinion, the most likely explanation to this is that they're beings of pure void and that they're essentially just outside of this life and death cycle. Death is just not really a thing for them. They can get banished out of the realm, probably similar to demons, but then they can return, or they can just entangle themselves so deeply into Azeroth that they're just always going to have some sort of an entry point that we can't possibly figure out every single time. Now, this brings us to Deathwing and why I think his return is actually very likely, even though it is kind of a crazy theory. Deathwing started out as a native elemental dragon, just like the proto-dragons, that was infused by the arcane and became a titan minion and, in a way, a being of order. However, he started really flirting with void magic, as we had seen from the Dragonflight legacies. Now, when you're using magic like this, it doesn't really turn you into that cosmological being, just how our playable warlocks are not exactly demons, but when you really start dabbling into magic, when it consumes you, you do actually turn into a brand new being, like a completely different force, similar to how demon hunters are technically demons as they had consumed a literal demon. In my opinion, this is the exact same process as the Netherus team had done with Argus. If you infuse someone with enough cosmological energy, they actually shift to that side. This was proven time and time again. I think this might even be how we mortals were even tied to the Death Realm. Maybe naturally this wasn't supposed to be the case, which is the entire storyline of how the first ones created these supposed cycles, and the entire Sylvana storyline that said that we never actually had free will. Now, I don't think this is particularly controversial to say that Deathwing, by his end, when we had defeated him, was literally just a being of pure void. His use of magic started more than 20,000 years ago, where he probably occasionally used Old God powers. Then he got fully corrupted and mad, tried to kill the aspects, and at the end, the guy was literally just a hand of the old gods just trying to bring the hour of twilight and nothing else. We had even seen that end scenario where he was no longer useful to the old gods, but they had freed themselves, so he just ended up impaled on the spike. I think it is pretty safe to say that Neltharion fully lost his grip over old god magic and just fell into the void pool completely and just turned into a void being. Now, this isn't even my speculation. We have the actual official Blizzard description that describes the madness of Deathwing in his final moments in the final battle when we had defeated him. A warped mass of molten hatred and unfathomable power. This formless, mindless horror cannot be stopped. Whatever left of Neltharion, the Earth Warder, is long gone. His mind and soul corrupted and devoured by his old god masters. All this monstrous being desires is destruction, annihilation, and the end of all things. So, let's just say he really was devoured by the old gods and became a being of the void. Then think about it. How have we possibly killed him if he is outside of this cycle? The void beings seem to be outside of the cycle. Deathwing turned into a void being, so it is almost certain he was sent into the void afterlife. He wasn't sent into the Shadowlands. Now, you may be thinking, but Neltharion was an aspect, Ysera was an aspect, we saw her in our build, and once again, this isn't really a counterpoint, it is just further confirmation of this. Ysera is heavily tied to the Emerald Dream, that is heavily tied to our build, which, as we can tell by this point, is tied in some way to the Titans and this entire life and death cycle. So, just how Neltharion would have been infused by the void, Ysera was infused by life, which is why he saw her back then and now. However, the best point is that a super important villain like this was not present in the Shadowlands, and we had not seen him anywhere, but we did see a villain like Garrosh, who was but a mere orc. This means that Deathwing is very likely chilling somewhere in the Void afterlife, if there even is such a thing, or he's just in the Void realm. We know that the Void have their own realm that is completely separate from the material plane. This is obvious because we know, for example, the Void Lords live here, but they're just so incredibly powerful that they need some crazy power source to even manifest themselves in the material plane. Now, with all the recent old god hints, the possible return of the Black Empire, and most importantly, the really heavy hints of N'Zoth at his return, who, as you may know, was the one that was responsible for the corruption of Neltharion, it is likely they might bring back Deathwing as a really powerful weapon, but this time as a complete and utter void monstrosity, like a Catraxi faceless one type thing and not really a dragon. It really makes sense, and it could be triggered by the return of the aspect powers. Deathwing is still an aspect despite his defeat, so once the aspects reclaim their power, they might inadvertently bring back the power to Neltharion that could subsequently be used as a gateway for a Void invasion. Furthermore, we have the entire storyline of the Black Dragon fight with Rathian and Sabellian. Who knows, maybe Sabellian could rejoin his father, maybe that is why he was sent back, or they can really see what happens when you get fully corrupted, so they might turn them even further away, which would be like the final cleansing of the Black Dragon fight. Of course, at the moment, all of this is just wild speculation, but really, I think it is 100% plausible if we go by the lore that Blizzard had recently established. Thank you for watching. Check out the possible return of Northrend in Dragon fight by clicking on the screen, and check out Donut's Academy for videos on real-world history. See you next time.